We all laughed at the Ewoks like they were Lucas's desperate attempt to sell teddy bears with spears. But if you actually watch Return of the Jedi without nostalgia goggles, those little furballs are terrifying. They are not cuddly, they are straight up feral. And the more you think about it, the scarier it gets. These things did not just fight stormtroopers. They captured Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Chewbacca in about 5 minutes flat. They tied them up, stacked some firewood, and immediately started prepping a barbecue. That is not adorable. That is psychotic efficiency. Imagine being roasted alive by something that looks like your grandma's plush toy collection. That is nightmare fuel, with button noses. And do not even get me started on the traps. These little woodland creatures engineered log swings that crumpled Imperial walkers like soda cans. They built nets that snatched full-grown soldiers out of mid-air. They had boulders locked and loaded to crush helmets like eggshells. Who designs that level of brutality while still living in tree huts? These Ewoks were running an entire guerrilla warfare program right under the Empire's nose. The messed up part is how much they enjoyed it. By the end of the movie, they are drumming on stormtrooper helmets like it is party night on Endor. Those helmets still had heads in them minutes earlier. That is not a quirky musical number. That is a victory ritual that feels way closer to ancient war tribes than Saturday morning cartoons. We call it cute because they are small, but if Wookiees did this, we would call it terrifying. And that is what makes them dangerous. Everyone underestimates them. The Empire laughed, the rebels laughed, and even audiences laughed. But the Ewoks turned out to be the deadliest warriors in the Battle of Endor. They toppled the most advanced military in the galaxy with sticks, rocks, and pure savagery. That is not comedy. That is horror disguised in fur. In this video, we are going to break down exactly why the Ewoks were not lovable mascots, but cold-blooded survivalists. How their culture points to something much darker than anyone admits. And why underestimating them is the scariest mistake the Empire ever made. Buckle up, because we are about to ruin your childhood toys forever, young spoi. On the surface, Ewoks look like stuffed animals that accidentally wandered into a galactic war. Small, furry, waddling creatures with big eyes and squeaky voices. But if you scratch beneath that adorable exterior, the curiosity kicks in. Because why exactly were these little forest dwellers so skilled at warfare? How does a society of teddy bears build traps capable of crushing armoured vehicles? Return of the Jedi gives us glimpses of their abilities, but never explains them. Where did they learn to engineer swinging log traps that could obliterate an AT seat? Who taught them how to coordinate battle tactics that overwhelmed stormtroopers trained by the Empire? It is as if the Ewoks were quietly running their own military academy in the woods while pretending to roast marshmallows. Even their cultural practices raise questions. Why were they so quick to capture Han, Luke, and Chewbacca and prepare them for a feast? They did not hesitate, they did not debate. They immediately tied them up and planned dinner. That suggests this was not their first time serving humanoid entrees. Which makes you wonder, how many unlucky travellers vanished in those forests without anyone ever knowing? And then there are the trophies. By the end of the battle, Ewoks are seen drumming on stormtrooper helmets, like they are festive decorations. Except those helmets clearly belong to dead men lying on the ground minutes earlier. This is not cute, it is macabre. A cultural celebration built on the corpses of enemies. The curiosity grows the more you think about it. Are Ewoks really allies of the rebellion? Or were the rebels just lucky enough to stumble into a tribe of fur-covered psychopaths who already had a taste for blood? What is frustrating is how long the Ewoks have been written off as comic relief. Fans love to joke about Lucas trying to sell plush toys, but the films themselves tell a darker story. And ignoring that side of them feels like missing the entire point of their role in Return of the Jedi. For one thing, the Ewoks are never portrayed as naive. They trick the rebels into captivity, they manipulate C-3PO by worshipping him as a god, and they negotiate from a position of leverage. That is not innocence, that is strategy. And it is frustrating that people still pretend they are harmless when the movie shows them operating with ruthless precision. Even the Battle of Endor proves this. They launch ambushes, they overwhelm superior firepower, and they are completely willing to die for their cause. Their combat is brutal and efficient, with enemies crushed, bludgeoned, and trapped. Yet because they look fuzzy, we are supposed to laugh. If you replace them with scarred warriors in armor, the entire battle would play like a horror movie instead of a Saturday morning cartoon. But beneath the frustration lies a layer of sorrow. Because when you really look at the Ewoks, you realize their existence is shaped by endless conflict. These creatures did not build deadly traps out of boredom. They built them because they lived in a world where survival demanded brutality. Think about the scale of the Empire's invasion. Armoured walkers, garrisons of stormtroopers, and industrial machinery tearing through the forest. For a primitive species, that is not just occupation, it is annihilation. The Ewoks had no choice but to fight with every tool they could muster. And that makes their violence less comedic and more tragic. Their quickness to capture and sacrifice strangers might not just be cruelty, it might be the result of generations living under threat, learning to strike first before they become prey. What looks like psychopathy might also be desperation, a culture warped by constant danger. That realization adds weight to their actions, turning them from comic relief into a symbol of survival at any cost. Even the celebration after the battle carries sorrow when you stop to think about it. They drum on helmets because they have lost countless battles before. They cheer over corpses because that is the only way to convince themselves they are safe for another night. It is not joy, it is catharsis carved out of bloodshed. So, yes, the Ewoks are terrifying. But they are also tragic because their entire existence proves that even the cutest creatures are forced into savagery when the galaxy leaves them no other choice. And yet, there is awe in how the Ewoks turned their disadvantage into victory. Watching them dismantle the most advanced military machine in the galaxy, using sticks, stones, and cunning, is one of the most impressive feats in Star Wars. It is easy to mock, but the achievement is staggering. Picture the scale of that battle. Imperial walkers blasting through the forest, stormtroopers in full armor, firing blasters, and the rebels on the brink of defeat. Then out of nowhere, furry warriors armed with nothing but courage and engineering ingenuity flip the entire fight. Trees topple, logs crush machinery, nets yank soldiers into the air. It is guerrilla warfare at its most creative. There is awe in their unity too. Every Ewok, young and old, fights with absolute determination. They swarm enemies without hesitation, using teamwork that rivals elite squads. Their bravery inspires the rebels to keep pushing forward, proving that even the smallest ally can change the tide of war. The most awe-inspiring part is how their tactics expose the arrogance of the Empire. The stormtroopers and commanders laugh at them just as the audience does. But by the time the Death Star explodes, those little warriors have humiliated the most powerful regime in galactic history. That is not just impressive, it is poetic. The Ewoks remind us that awe does not always come from grand armies or legendary heroes. Sometimes it comes from the underestimated rising up and proving everyone wrong in spectacular fashion. Because their story shows that even the smallest, most underestimated people can stand against oppression. They prove that strength is not just about weapons, but about willpower, unity, and the refusal to bow down. Leia's bond with them highlights this perfectly. She does not mock them or dismiss them. She treats them as equals. And that act of respect opens the door to an alliance that changes the course of history. It is a hopeful reminder that partnerships often come from places we least expect. The Ewoks also give hope in their creativity. They fight with slingshots, tripwires, and ambushes, tools built not for glory, but for survival. Their victory sends the message that you do not need to match an enemy's power to defeat them. You just need to outthink them. That lesson is as inspiring as it is practical. Their survival after the war is another point of hope. While other planets are scarred by endless battles, Endor remains a symbol of resilience. The Ewoks outlast the Empire's might, turning their forest into the place where tyranny was broken. That legacy is a hopeful spark for the entire galaxy. So even though they terrify us, the Ewoks also inspire us. They remind us that the underestimated are often the ones who change the world, and that is a hopeful truth hiding beneath the fur and the spears. But ultimately, the Ewoks are a tragic contradiction, cute enough to be marketed as toys, brutal enough to be feared as warriors. And that contradiction makes them one of the most unsettling parts of Star Wars. Their story resolves in celebration, but the truth lingers. These are not harmless creatures dancing around a campfire. They are survivors of a war who will forever carry the scars of violence. Behind the smiles and cheers lies a culture shaped by bloodshed and desperation. The tragedy is that nobody notices. The rebels see them as allies, the audience laughs at their antics, and the galaxy moves on. But the Ewoks remain on Endor, forever prepared to strike at the next threat, forever defined by the war that forced them into savagery. It is unsettling to realize that Palpatine's empire fell not just because of Jedi or rebels, but because an army of woodland predators decided to fight. That truth undercuts the cuteness and forces us to see them for what they really are. Not pets, not mascots, but a society hardened by conflict. So the Ewoks are not adorable sidekicks. They are proof that appearances lie. And their story is a resolution wrapped in tragedy, reminding us that in the galaxy far, far away, even the smallest creatures can be the most dangerous.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.